Hi everyone, thank you for joining this Q&A. My name is Charlotte and I'm a fourth year math student at Oxford. So welcome to this InsideUni Q&A about studying math at Oxford and Cambridge. So just to talk to you a bit about InsideUni. InsideUni is a non-profit student-led project to make the Oxford and Cambridge applications more accessible. We crowdsource application advice from current students, which you can find for free on our website, which is insideuni.org, which will be posted on the YouTube chat. So feel free to take a look. But yeah, thank you very much for joining today. The idea behind this Q&A is that it can be quite confusing when you apply. So we're trying to demystify the process, and it's part of InsideUni live video series where you can ask Oxbridge students about different aspects of uni life. So feel free to check our other videos too. We have prepared some questions, but we'll also be taking live questions about anything kind of related to Oxford, Cambridge, math. So feel free to ask whatever you want to ask. You can just do that on the YouTube chat, and feel free to say hello in the chat if you're watching too. So I'll just start by introducing the panelists that we have today. So first we have Tom with us today. So Tom has a really cool website that we'll just post on the chat, so feel free to take a look. But I'll just take a bit of time to talk about Tom and the stuff he does. So Tom is a mathematician at Oxford. He's actually a tutor, so he teaches undergraduates at a few different colleges, like St. Edmund Hall, St. Hugh's College, St. John's College. And he also runs an award-winning website that I just mentioned, which is Tomrocksmaths.com. So feel free to take a look. And he also has social media profiles on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, which is just called Tomrocksmaths. So Tom regularly appears on the BBC and stuff like Oxbridge, which is Oxford University Digital Outreach Portal, or also Numberphile, which is a math education channel on YouTube. And I guess we'll take a bit of time to talk about exactly what he does in a few minutes. And we also have with us today Aaron and Parth, who are the presidents of Oxford and Cambridge Math Societies. So yeah, so they're just current students at Oxbridge. It's really good to have their point of view too. So just feel free to ask any questions you might have. And I just let the panelists introduce themselves just now. So Tom, I don't know if you want to kick off maybe.
Well, you kind of said it all, Charlotte, but thank you. The only thing maybe that I would add is I actually studied at Oxford myself as an undergraduate student. So whilst it was maybe 10 years ago when I was going through the application process, I have been through that process myself, doing the admissions test, the interview, and then now actually setting the admissions test and doing the interviews as a tutor. So I can offer opinions from both sides of the of the playing field. And I did also do my PhD at Cambridge. So again, whilst that was graduate study, which is a little different, the application procedure, etc., is a little different, I still can hopefully offer some insights into just general life in Cambridge and maths at Cambridge as well.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, we're definitely very lucky to have Tom today. I'm sure we can learn a lot from him, so feel free to ask any questions you might have. And then maybe Aaron and Parth, if you want to start maybe by introducing yourself.
Right, hello everyone. So I'm Parth. I'm a third-year student at Gonville and Caius College in Cambridge, and I'm also the president of the Archimedeans, which is Cambridge University Math Society. And I'm largely interested in pure maths and theoretical computer sciences. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Parth. And Aaron, what about you?
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm a third year at St John's College in Oxford currently. And yeah, as Charlotte said, I'm currently running Oxford's Undergraduate Maths Society, the Invariants this year, which is kind of like the main like society for undergraduate mathematicians. And yeah, I'm kind of interested in pure maths. So yeah.
Great. Well, I'm more interested in applied maths, so feel free to ask questions about anything really. And yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a fourth year math student. I'm at Keble College. And yeah, so actually I just finished my Oxford degree. But yeah, maybe if we just kick off with kind of a very general question, maybe for Parth and Aaron, if you could just say, take a minute to explain why did you apply to Oxbridge in the first place?
So I applied, I guess, for kind of the obvious reason, because well, Oxbridge has a very good reputation for mathematics, I think. As for why Oxford in particular, I think that was mainly kind of gut feeling. But yeah, the main reason I applied is because of like the very good reputation for mathematics. So yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason. They're two of the best universities in the world for maths in particular. I would say that what helped me choose between Oxford and Cambridge was just the very different application procedures. And it's up to you which one caters to your interests more. And that should be the way to choose, because one of them has a subjective paper after you get your interviews, while the other one has an exam before your interviews. So whichever method you feel like you do best in is the one you should go for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, that's also why I applied to Oxford, just because the admission test was before the interview, and it was better for me in terms of timing. But yeah, I guess it just really depends on you and what you want to do. Was it the case for you, Aaron, too?
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of doing kind of match and then kind of having a bit of a safer feeling, I guess, rather than like having to do STEP and A levels at the same time. I thought that was kind of a bit of a stressful thing to think about for me. So yeah, that's just how I felt. So yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll talk a bit about the admission test in a bit more detail in a few minutes. But I just wanted to kind of start off with a few questions. Then we'll move on maybe more to the application side, and then we can think about what it's like to actually study at Oxbridge once you're there. But then just to start also, Tom, could you tell us a bit more details about your website, like what kind of videos do you do? What is kind of the purpose behind your videos?
Absolutely, happy to. So I think the original idea was I wanted to create maths-based online content, and I wanted to try and kind of have a bit more fun with it than I felt the current material was. So there was, I started this about 3 years ago. There were loads of brilliant resources available online, Numberphile being the prime example. It's fantastic. You can learn so much. It's talking to world experts. It's really such a brilliant free resource. But at the same time, it's all quite serious. Like you have a bit of a laugh and a joke, and you kind of, the passion of the presenters, I think, comes across in those videos, which helps to generate that extra like excitement and entertainment. But I kind of originally just wanted to do something a little bit completely not serious and completely sort of out there. And one of the things that happened as a result of that was I ended up creating this persona as the naked mathematician, which is where I do some lectures in my underwear. I did do one in Oxford, actually, a couple of years ago, which is quite entertaining. Obviously, the whole point here is it's just to have a little bit more fun with the subject, because when I was doing some research, when I was deciding to launch the website and the YouTube channel, and I was thinking, what can I do a bit differently? So I went and spoke to my target audience of people who maybe don't like maths or don't really engage with maths. And one of the things that came back to me, which really surprised me, was that lots of people outside of the subject see it as very serious. And to me, which is possibly part of my personality, but to me that the easiest way to make something not serious was like, well, I'll just do it in my pants. And then how could anybody take what I'm saying seriously? So like that to me was just a very easy way just to create something a bit more fun and a bit different with maths. And I'm still talking about reasonably advanced maths topics, but just having a little bit more fun with it. So I think the main goal is just to try and have a bit more fun. I also do other things where I go into more in-depth topics. So I've done a lot based on fluid mechanics. So my research is in fluid mechanics. So I do lots of videos based on that, just because I have access to lots of experts in that area. And you also have lots of nice experiments, which create really good visuals for videos. But I think the overall theme is just to kind of have a bit of fun with the subject.
Great, thank you. And would you just have a quick example of a recent video you did and you think would be really cool to watch?
Yes, well, I'm going to promote two here because I like both of them. So one of them is super relevant. I recently did a mock Oxford interview with Steve Chow. So Steve runs another YouTube channel called Black Pen, Red Pen. Great channel. Really recommend everyone should check it out. And he's a mathematician in America. And we did this online sort of Oxford mock interview. So I actually used the interview question I asked 2 years ago. So Steve didn't know this, but we did a proper interview that I gave to my current students now 2 years ago. And we went through that question. So that one I think is really relevant to this discussion and also is quite fun. And another one I did the week before that was looking at fractals. And I did an in-depth sort of investigation into the Cox snowflake, which is a particular fractal. It kind of looks like a snowflake, and actually went through the calculation to show that the perimeter is infinite, but the area of the shape is finite, which is quite an interesting. It feels like it should be almost like contradictory, but it's sort of, once you go through the steps, you see why it works and how it works. So they would be my two recommendations.
Right. I totally knew that about fractals, of course. But yeah, great to hear. Thanks, Tom. And maybe Aaron and Parth, if you want to talk a bit about the societies you are president of, like what kind of events do
you... Right, thank you. I'd love to. So the Archimedeans is the largest math society in Cambridge. And there are 3 other math societies that are large. But the Archimedeans, we typically have 2 kinds of events. We have academic talks every week where we invite speakers from around the world. We are taking advantage of the COVID pandemic. And we are getting speakers from Americas as well as from the other universities. But typically, we have speakers who are PhD students. We have speakers who are professors. And now we have also started hosting undergrad talks. And the good thing is, we have started recording these talks. So if there is a link in the description for the Archimedeans YouTube channel, which you can visit and watch all of our talks on YouTube. We also have other for fun events every week. So we have pizza and board games events for mathematicians. We have pub quizzes. And overall, the idea is to bring mathematicians together to have fun and discuss ideas.
Okay, great. Thanks. And what about you, Aaron? Is it kind of similar or?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, I'd say quite similar. So the Invariants is kind of like a main social platform for mathematicians in Oxford. So we have social events. We also have many events related to mathematics. We have regular speakers. So last term, I don't know if you've heard of the YouTube channel 3 Blue 1 Brown, but he spoke at the Invariants last term. And we also have things like kind of puzzle competitions and kind of sponsored events where you kind of meet with our sponsors and yeah, we're kind of in contact with them if like you want to apply to those companies and stuff like that as well. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now I wanted to take some time to talk a bit more about the actual application process, which is complicated, I would say, maybe to some extent, because you have like an admission test, interview, etc. So I just wanted to start with, how would you have any suggestions about how to prepare for the admissions test, which is so the STEP for Cambridge and the math admissions test for?
So I can speak for STEP. Usually very few students get any help from their schools for STEP, and it is intended to be designed in a way that you can study for it on your own, and so do most of the people who are studying with me in Cambridge. And there are a lot of free resources available. So if you check the university's STEP website, which should be linked in the chat, you can, there's a STEP support program, which is the university's official help program for STEP, which has questions as well as explanations for how to solve them. And it's all available for free. There's also Stephen Siklos's excellent book, which should also be available for free if you just Google for it.
Okay, great. I don't know if anyone else would like to kind of jump in on that as well, and especially maybe if you have any idea specifically about what to do if your school doesn't offer any help. Are there any resources one could use for this admission test, and maybe globally, in order to write your personal statement? I don't know, Tom, if you have any idea, for example.
Regarding the admissions test, I second everything that Parth said about the brilliant the program for the STEP at Cambridge. I actually used to work on that when I was a PhD student, doing the marking. So students be able to submit their answers, and then as they recruited some of us as PhD students to then mark their work and give them actual feedback, as well as obviously having access to the mark scheme. And then in terms of the Oxford, the maths, the Oxford admissions test, so it's obviously slightly different to STEP. You'll notice this if you look at both exams, they have slightly different styles, but fundamentally they're testing the same thing. So whilst the main way to prepare for one of, say you're going to Cambridge and you have to do the STEP, the main way to prepare for the STEP is to just do as many practice questions as you possibly can. That is absolutely, it's not very original, but that is the best way to prepare for that particular exam. And it's the same for the Oxford Maths, the MAT. Do as many of them as you can. And I know for sure with the MAT, the MAT, you have access to the last 20 years worth of exams, or however many years it's been running for. Maybe it's like 14 or something, plus the full solutions. So not only can you do the questions yourself, you can then check your answers, which is obviously very, very helpful. So you don't need to rely on somebody at your school, for example, to mark your work. You can actually have access to the mark scheme and mark it yourself. And you should do that and try and be as, I wouldn't say overly harsh, but if you do get something wrong and you didn't do it right, then you'd obviously be true to yourself, because you're only tricking yourself. But whilst they are slightly different in their style, because they're fundamentally testing the same thing, you can actually use the practice papers from the other tests that you're not planning to do to supplement your practice for the one you are planning to do. So whether you're doing the MAT or the STEP, I would recommend working your way through all possible past exams for both possible admissions tests. Because again, whilst they have very slightly different styles and very slightly different sort of syllabus or syllabi to each of them, they're still fundamentally checking the same ability, which is, can you take some of the basic maths you've learned at school and apply it in unfamiliar contexts? That's really what they're trying to test, because that's what you have to do at university. So because they're both testing the same thing, you can actually just go through and do past exam questions from both of them. Because I've definitely spoken to students in the past who say 12 years worth of MAT papers, they've done that within the first month of their revision, and then they have no other things they can do. So I think, then going on to do the STEP paper or the other way around is a really, really useful resource that not many people actually sort of take advantage of.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think, for example, for me, my school didn't really offer any help, because I just went to a French school. They don't really kind of send students to Oxbridge to study maths. But as Tom just mentioned, there is so much stuff online, like as in all the tests online and the solutions. So I just did all the tests twice, I think. And that was already a really, really good starting point. Because at the end of the day, the admissions test is such an important part. So I think another point that I wanted to mention is that if you look at the actual syllabus covered by the admissions test, it's not that bad in a way. There's nothing exceptionally difficult. So I didn't really need that much help from my school. It was mostly stuff I could figure out on my own or just by reading stuff online, So I think the actual content you can be tested on is, as in the actual knowledge, is not that bad, but you do really need to get that practice in, get used to the style of questions, and yeah, I think that's it really.
Yeah,
What
so
about
I'd
you?
like to add. I'd like to add that you should always be up to date with what's going on the website, because the faculty wants to help you to get in. And so we have organized a lot of events in the past which were in person. So we would invite students to come and try mock interviews, try mock step papers, and we would mark them. And now that everything is online, you might be able to participate from your home. So it's always worth to keep checking what's happening.
Yeah, just to add to also what Tom said, I personally, from my experience, found doing the step 1 papers to be extremely useful preparation for the MHE. So yeah, that's perhaps something to consider when you're doing that exam.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then maybe if we just do kind of a quick one in there. Why did you apply specifically to study maths and not like, for example, at Oxford, you can study maths and computer science, statistics?
So yeah, I chose to do maths for kind of various number of reasons. So at Oxford, there are a variety of joint schools degrees you can do. You can do either just the like maths course, or you can do maths and stats, maths and computer science, maths and philosophy, and there's also a 4th year option to do a master's in physics if you want to. But I chose to do maths because basically that's where my interests lie. So I mean, I wasn't particularly interested in doing philosophy or computer science. I also hadn't done like A levels in subjects relevant to that, so I couldn't really apply to those subjects. It's also worth considering if you're going to apply for maths and stats. I believe if you start off on a maths degree, you can still choose to switch to maths and stats if you want to, just by taking more statistics options. So
yeah, absolutely. You can definitely do that in your second year. So it's definitely something worth keeping in mind. But again, it's also worth knowing that you don't have to study straight math if you want to do something slightly different. There are other options to consider too. And then I wanted to move on maybe to, if we think about interviews specifically, I think, Tom, it would be really, really helpful to have your perspective on this. Like, what would you want to see in a student? And maybe what kind of questions do you ask? As in, what do you really want to test in an interview?
Yeah, I was waiting for this one. So, okay, what am I looking for in a student? First of all, complete love and passion for the subject. So, it's, again, possibly not very original, but for me as a tutor, I want to be working with somebody who loves the subject as much as I do and gets as much enjoyment from the subject as I do. So we can sort of feed off each other when we're in a tutorial, sort of, with that back and forth. So real passion, enjoyment of the subject. That's also really important, because when you go to university, you can, and I was told this by my undergraduate tutors, in fact, and I do like repeating this, you can think of it as doing a full-time job. So you'll be doing maths for 35 to 40 hours a week. And I'm sure all of you as students will back me up that it's at least 35 to 40 hours a week of just doing maths. So it is a full-time job. So you really do need to enjoy your subject if you're going to be doing it as though it was a full-time job. So that's also an important reason why we do look for that passion and enjoyment in the subject. Beyond that, also, we tend to look for students that will actually thrive in the Oxford or the Cambridge system. So with the personalized learning, with the tutorials where it's one, or supervisions as they're called in Cambridge, where you have your one tutor, say me, and 2 students. So having that interaction gives you very personalized learning, and that works for some people and doesn't work for others. So a lot of what the interview is about is trying to judge, will this candidate actually sort of do well and benefit from that particular teaching environment, or would they in fact be better suited to a larger class environment, which wouldn't be what you would get at Oxford or Cambridge. So there's some element of that as well. The interview is more, to me as a tutor, I see it more as doing a practice tutorial. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk through some maths. I'm going to tell you something that I don't expect you to know. I'm going to teach you something, maybe for a few minutes, tell you something brand new that I expect you to have zero knowledge of. And then I want to see, how do you then use that new knowledge to answer a question, to try and solve a maths problem? Because that's exactly what a tutorial is in the majority of cases. You in a tutorial, you've done your work beforehand and bring it along to the tutorial. But if there's something that you can't do, one of those questions, then I'm going to explain how to do that in the tutorial, and then we're going to work through the problem together to then get the correct solution. So an interview is very much like a practice tutorial, and that's why we still use them to select our candidates, because the best way of testing how you will do in the Oxbridge environment is by doing the practice tutorial and practicing how you're going to be taught. So they're the main 2 things, I think. For me, you're looking for that passion, and also you're looking for that ability to actually learn new things, take things in quickly, and then use them in unfamiliar or new situations in sort of the practice tutorial.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I think I totally agree. From my experience, I wouldn't say it was necessarily about knowledge. It's more about being given something completely new that you've never seen before. And it's really important, I think, 2 things. Number one, show that you have ideas, that you want to find the answers, that you want to try this, even if it doesn't work. At least you want. If the tutor, the person interviewing you, is giving you a hint, it's super helpful to really listen, take that in, and show that you can build on that hint, because at the end of the day, they want someone they can work with for the next 3 or 4 years. So yeah, but that being said, there is some kind of basic knowledge you need, like basic integrals, things like that, because it would be a shame to kind of fail an interview because you forgot about that that classic integral. I don't know about Parth and Aaron, if you have anything you want to add about interviews.
I'd say my kind of main bit of advice is just like be yourself. Yeah, like don't try and like pretend to be anything that you're not. Just like, yeah, I mean, if you're just like do your best, then and that's like probably that's the best strategy, I think.
My advice would be to just learn how to communicate maths, because you don't want to be sitting there with the maths going on in your head and your interviewer not knowing what you're thinking about. And it's very important that you learn to think out loud when you're actually working through the problem, so that your interviewer at least knows that, yes, you're thinking in the right direction and you were this close to the answer, but you did not know how to get there.
Again, that's just to follow up on what Parth said, that's very true about why you can think of the interview as a mock or practice tutorial. Because again, in a tutorial, the whole teaching dynamic is only going to work if you're able to communicate to me or to your tutor what it is that you're trying to do and what your thinking is. So again, that's why we sort of encourage this thinking out loud in the interview. One other thing that I forgot to mention, which I think is probably worth adding while we're sort of talking about interviews, is a lot of the time as well, for us as tutors, we will almost purposefully try to find somewhere where you will get stuck during that interview. Because again, perhaps up until this point in your mathematical career, you have most likely never been properly stuck on a question. And so I can guarantee, no matter how fantastic you are at high school, once you come to Oxford or Cambridge to study maths, you will get stuck, like guaranteed. And I can see you all sort of nodding and smiling and laughing, because you know at some point in your career so far as students, you have got stuck. Sometimes it happens very early, sometimes it happens in third year or fourth year, but you will get stuck on something and not really know how to, like, really stuck. And again, if we can capture that in the interview, we like want, you know, as a tutor, I want to find the place where this person gets stuck. I don't really care what it is or at which point that is, but it's then I can then see how you overcome that challenge and how you overcome being stuck. And that is just incredibly valuable to us, to see how you cope with that situation, knowing that it will happen to everybody once you're actually at the university studying for your degree. So in short, don't worry if you get stuck. We're trying almost to make you get stuck.
Absolutely. I guess, Tom, if you think about it, you want to see how a student improves, even if it's over 20 minutes, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to get you stuck. I can then teach you something, or we as the tutors can then teach you something new, and then see how you process that new information and use it, you know, based on what we've told you. Because again, your whole degree is lectures give you information, it goes in, you have to process that to then answer the problem sheets. So it's all just kind of, as much as we can in a 20-minute interview, we're trying to recreate the various things that we know will happen to you during your degree in Oxford or Cambridge. So it's kind of like a practice, really. It's like almost like a test or dummy run to see how you would do in that situation.
Okay, great. And yeah, maybe just to follow up on that question, we just got a live question. Again, feel free to ask questions on the YouTube chat and we'll try to cover them. So the question is, what kind of preparation would you recommend for interviews as opposed to the entrance exams?
Yeah, I could answer that. So I think the most helpful thing I did before my interview was to just get a friend to sit in front of me, and I would explain mathematical ideas and concepts to him. And this way, I trained myself to think out loud through every step of computation. This adds into what I said previously. You need to be good at thinking out loud in an interview.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Partha said. Definitely, even your friends, even your parents, your younger, older siblings, grandparents, anybody, they don't need to know what you are saying. It doesn't matter if they have no idea and think you're speaking in a foreign language when you're explaining your maths. It's incredibly good practice to explain your solution to a problem out loud, because that's exactly what you're going to have to do in the interview. And you just don't get that experience at all in a school setting. You've never done it before. So you really do need to practice that, like Partha said. Something else that I think is also very useful. I thought I had something. Oh yeah, something else that's very useful is to look up and sort of digest maths that's outside of the school syllabus. So this doesn't need to be like getting out a very heavy old dusty textbook. This can just be watching a video on YouTube of an interesting piece of maths. So let's say a number file video or a 3 blue 1 brown video or whatever video you want. And just, you know, it's something that you've never seen before. You're going to watch that 10, 20-minute video, digest that information, and then maybe go away and try and do a little bit of research yourself, or maybe try and find some other similar areas and do a bit of reading. But that's very much what the interview is like. You're absorbing new information. So instead of doing it from the interview, you're doing it from a video, but then you're going away and trying to do something with that yourself. So watching a video and then trying to play around with that new knowledge is pretty much what we're going to be doing in an interview, when I explain to you this new concept and then ask you to answer a question based on it.
Absolutely. I think if you watch Tom videos, it helps. You know, you can see how he communicates math in an enthusiastic way. I think it's quite helpful to see, really, because it might be a bit hard to visualize sometimes. But yeah, I totally agree with everything that that you all said. I think another way to think about it is, imagine you have a really complicated problem. If you only have the answer, it might be a bit worthless. Like, we really want to see, how did you get there? Actually, it's way more important. So when you practice on your own, don't just give the answer. Make sure you say, exaggerate it. Say, this is my step one. I did this. Maybe it doesn't work. Okay, let's do something else. Then step two. Just make sure it's crystal clear, I would say. And then maybe just conscious of time. If we spend a bit of time thinking about what is it actually like to study at Oxbridge, once you're there, like what do you do, etc. So I think something quite important to think about is, what is the main difference between maths at school versus maths at uni? Does it take a different style of studying, for example? So would any of you like to talk about this?
Yeah, so I think really the main difference between maths at school and maths at university is maths at school, especially at A level, I think has a very heavy focus on computation. Whereas at university, you're frequently doing things that you haven't seen before, basically where you're trying to solve some problem or exercise that you've been set there. You kind of haven't seen that method before, or they're looking for kind of deduction rather than kind of computing something. So that's definitely something you have to get used to when you get to a university, I think.
I'd like to add to that, saying that in school, you typically would not find yourself stuck because the questions are designed in a way that you learn a concept and you immediately apply it with a small leap. But here you're truly stuck because you're expected to discover new maths on your own, and results would not be spoon-fed. So you have to think about it for 3 days before you discover a new method to solve a question, and quite often you end up discovering something totally new.
And one way I like to sort of think about this is, it's the kind of maths that we do is very similar to the kind of questions you'll see on the entrance exams, in fact, in the sense that when at school, let's say we were doing a question that involved differentiation, then you would be given a set of functions and the question would say, differentiate these functions or calculate the derivative of these functions. And you go through and you calculate the derivative. The kind of question and the kind of way you would do a problem like that at Oxford or Cambridge would be, it would sort of be given in a different setting. It might, you might have a function, and then the question might ask, how could we optimize this function, for example. So really it's saying, can you differentiate it, set the derivative to 0, find the maximum or the minimum, etc. But it's not saying that out loud. It's presented in a different context where there's that gap on purpose. Here's the situation. Then if you're at school, you then get this middle bit and then you do the answer. Whereas now it's like, here's roughly what we're talking about. So you might see the word optimization, or you might see some mention of extreme points, something that's hinting maybe you want to do a derivative, but it will not explicitly say do a derivative. And it's just kind of filling in those gaps is one way that I would sort of think about the different way that we do maths. Obviously, we also learn completely new topics you've never done before as well. That goes without saying. But just in terms of the way that we do the maths, I think you're just not given anywhere near as much guidance and told exactly what you're meant to do. You have to make those filling those gaps yourself in your head.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add quickly, like for me, I focus more on applied maths, and that's something I didn't do at school really. And it's really cool. Like I do kind of math biology stuff, modeling of tumor growth, for example. And I didn't even know you could do this using math. And I think that's what I really like about maths at uni too. And then if we move on, maybe Aaron, could you tell us a bit more about what a typical day at Oxford is like for you?
Yeah, sure. So a kind of typical weekday for me would be in the morning, I would get up and go to the Maths Institute, which is the kind of like maths building where all the lectures are held. And then I would go there, maybe do some work and go to my lectures, which are usually in the morning. Then maybe after that, I'd go and have lunch. After lunch, I might go to kind of the college library or one of the university libraries to do some of my like tutorial sheets or stuff like that. And then I might also have some tutorials in the afternoon, which are kind of like where you go through a problem sheet that you've been set with like one or two other people and one of your tutors. And then after that, maybe get to, I don't know, like 5 or 6 o'clock, and I'd probably stop work for the day, go and have dinner, and then go to like some kind of society or social event in the evening. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just following up on that, maybe Parth, could you tell us a bit more about what tutorials or supervisions are? Like what happens really during a tutorial or a supervision?
So what typically happens is in a course, if you're doing a lecture course, the course is split into, let's say, four lecture sections. And for every section, there is an example sheet. So 4 lectures approximately would correspond to one example sheet. And then you have to spend around 3 to 4 days working through that sheet, trying to solve the questions. And you hand your supervision, so you hand your example sheet in to a designated supervisor, who is usually an expert in the subject who works in your college. So Tom is one. And then the supervisor overnight corrects your work, and you have a meeting with the supervisor, which is called a supervision in Cambridge, and it's called a tutorial in Oxford. But I think the idea is the same, in that the supervisor would then look at your work and comment on it, try to discuss your solutions and the right way to do the solutions, if there is any. It's more of a discussion session with an expert in the subject and one of your friends who is a designated supervision partner.
Okay, great. Tom, do you agree with that? Is that what your tutorials look like?
Yeah, almost. I mean, I'm sure Aaron and Parth are obviously experiencing them at the moment, as I am. So you know, they know how they work. The only other thing I might add is something that Parth is hinting at. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a right way to answer a question, but something that I try to do in my tutorials, and I'm sure lots of other supervisors and tutors do, is if you have managed to get the majority of the work correct, then there's not really, let me start again. If there are questions you can't do, then we're going to focus on those questions during that 1 hour of discussion, because the idea is, I want to teach you and help you to be able to answer those questions yourself next time you see something similar. So I definitely start by covering things that perhaps you didn't get completely correct. But then if you've managed to get lots of things correct, then I sort of slightly change the style and instead would look at alternative ways of solving those problems. So again, whilst there's only one correct answer in a maths problem, there are several different ways of getting to that answer. So it might be the case that Aaron has done it one way, maybe Parth did it a different way, and then I did it a third completely different way. So in that situation, we would all share our solutions. So, I might ask Aaron to explain to myself and Parth, how did you do it? Ask Parth to do the same, and then finally maybe show both Aaron and Parth the way I did it, just so that we can all see different viewpoints. So the next time we come across a similar problem, you have several routes that you can go down, because it might be the case that one of those methods is more suited to the new problem that you're trying to tackle.
Absolutely, yeah. I would definitely say that was my experience too. So just what happens once you get into Oxford and Cambridge? What is your first year like? What kind of courses do you study, for example?
So in Oxford, all of the first years study the same set of courses. So the first year is called prelims, and that's just the name for that set of courses. And I think the first time at least was probably the one where I spent the kind of most time adjusting. But I say I kind of, everyone kind of becomes like quite kind of close-knit, I'd say, because you spend a lot of time kind of learning stuff together. And in that first year, really, I mean, you'll get to the end of the first year and think, wow, I learned like really a lot this year. It's like, I kind of remember getting to the end of the third term in first year and really thinking like, this is so much different to what I knew last year. So yeah, you'll really learn a lot in the first term. It's like a really good experience.
Okay, great. What about you, Pass? I think there is a freshers guide that is quite helpful.
Right, so it's almost similar for us in that all first years do the same subjects, and it's a good mix between pure applied and logic and set theory stuff. So the faculty reps for the maths department and the Archimedeans have put together a freshers guide, which has most of the details relevant to first years in Cambridge, including informal descriptions of the course and also some fun stuff related to the course you could read. So the link should be in the chat, and you should definitely check out the document.
I would also maybe add, if you're interested in seeing what like the courses actually look like, all of the Oxford courses for first year are actually available online. I think it's like courses.maths.ox.ac.uk. You can kind of go there and like read through some of like the kind of first time or first year problem sheets if you want a little bit of taster. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think something worth mentioning is that there is a good mixture of pure math and applied math in first year. And then at least in Oxford, you can start specializing a bit more. You can start this process in your second year, and then in your third and fourth year, you entirely choose your options. So you can choose from a really wide range of at least 20, probably more options, which is really, really cool, I think. I don't know if anyone wants to add something else. Pass, is it similar in Cambridge?
It's in fact very similar in that in the first year, you want to just get a feel of what different flavors of maths are. Second year goes in a bit deeper. There's not a lot of choice, but you can still choose between broadly leaning towards pure maths or applied maths. But third year is when you can truly specialize. There are around 30 to 40 courses that you can choose from. And so you can entirely specialize in, say, I want to specialize in analysis in the next year. And same goes on in the fourth year. So in the third and fourth year, you will be doing the kind of math that interests you. And you have to spend the first 2 years trying to find out what that is.
Great. Thank you very much for your answers. And we're getting quite close to the end, but I just wanted to talk about something slightly different, which is what do students do after a math degree? Tom, would you like to talk a bit about that, maybe?
Would help if I unmuted myself, got carried away. I can certainly tell you what I did. So I finished my PhD in 2016 and then spent a year working for the BBC as a science journalist. So completely, I wouldn't say entirely unrelated to my maths degree and my maths thesis, but I was quite fortunate in that they were looking to expand their journalist pool and wanted to focus more on maths in general in their news coverage. And so they were looking specifically for somebody with a maths qualification to come in and help them, find the interesting math stories that were happening around the world. So I was very fortunate that sort of I didn't know necessarily that I wanted to go into journalism and media. It just seemed like a very fun job. So I ended up applying for it and then getting it, fortunately. So I did that for a year. And then that was how I developed my skills, I guess, in communication and media. And I decided I wanted to keep doing this, but wanted to do it for myself rather than for an organization. So, as great as the BBC are, it still didn't feel quite like I owned it as much as doing it for myself. So that was one of the reasons why I then decided to go down the route of doing my own thing with Tomrocksmaths. And then it just so happened that I figured if I was going to be believable as a mathematician online, then I should still be practicing maths myself. And so I then thought, well, what's the best way to practice something is to teach it. You know, it's classic saying, you don't understand something until you can teach it to others. And so then I started to look for teaching positions at universities, and then got sort of my job back in Oxford. So I now do the sort of half of my time is teaching. I no longer do research. I'm just purely focusing on the teaching. And then the time that I guess a normal mathematician would spend on research, I spend doing sort of online videos and sort of resources in that way. But I did do lots of different internships as a student, just to show the wide variety. I did do some teaching. So I went to China for a summer to do some teaching. I also worked for an insurance company as an actuary, which is a sort of classic thing for a mathematician to do. Very well paid, but I personally found it quite boring. But that's just me. Lots of people enjoy it. And I also did a research project as well, one of the summers, which sort of gave me a taste and convinced me that I wanted to do the PhD and do more research. So lots of different things you can do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think teaching and research is definitely kind of a big area. For me, I'm going into finance, which is also a classic application of math, into a kind of maybe slightly kind of mathematical modeling role. But this is just, kind of one of the options. I don't know about you, Parth and Aaron, if you've thought about it.
There's a lot of role of mathematics in computer science. And I feel like machine learning and stuff like automated theorem proving, there are these IT companies that want mathematicians to work for them. So it's with a maths degree, what you get is an ability to understand things better. And I think that's the most important thing you take away from your degree, that you can apply to any other job.
Absolutely, yeah, I definitely agree. Great, thank you very much for your answers. I just wanted to finish with if we can take do a last round of piece of advice you would have for prospective students. Maybe if you can mention a website you used, a book you read, something like that you would definitely recommend to someone watching us now.
So I have two book recommendations actually, which can kind of help bridge the gap between school and undergraduate mathematics. So one of them is called Towards Higher Mathematics by Richard Earl. Richard Earl is actually like the director of undergraduate studies in Oxford. And that is a really helpful book. And the other one is called A Concise Introduction to Pure Mathematics by Martin Liebeck. And that's particularly useful, I think, for UK students, because there's not that much pure mathematics that appears in A-level maths. So yeah, those are two really useful books in my opinion.
I'd like to recommend the book by Stephen Siklos, which is Advanced Problems in Mathematics. And this is also recommended by the University of Cambridge for preparation for STEPS. So it's an excellent resource with really interesting and fun problems, which you can think about. The other nice thing available for free on the internet, I would say, is Evan Chen's PDF called The Infinitely Large Napkin. And it's a really good introduction to university maths that breaks it down to layman terms. So you will still be learning what you'll be doing in university to a fairly high level of depth. And it will be simple enough. So that book you can keep reading until you graduate, really.
The main thing for me, I think, would be to really cultivate your passion and enjoyment of the subject by, for example, reading not textbooks, but also popular maths books. So I know when I was applying, I read a book called The Millennium Problems by Keith Devlin, which gives you an introduction to the $7 million Millennium Prize problems, which is very exciting for me as a teenager to think I could earn $1 million doing maths. Of course, it's not quite as easy as that, but I found that to be just a good way of generating sort of even more passion for my subject. Also recently, 17 Equations That Changed the World by Ian Stewart. He's a mathematician in Warwick. So that's also an excellent book. Again, it's sort of more popular maths rather than a textbook. So it just makes it a much more enjoyable read, I think, but also does still cover some very fundamental, ideas and concepts. And I think in general, just watching YouTube videos, I'm bound to say this, being someone who produces YouTube videos, but there's so much great maths content available. And I think you don't need to try and follow everything. You don't need to try and understand everything. Just sort of opening yourself up to exploring different areas of maths that you literally have no idea existed until you watch this particular video or look at this particular resource. So we're not at all expecting anybody to understand these things, but it's just really, to me, it's a really nice demonstration that you enjoy the subject and you have that passion and that drive that you're going to need to succeed at Oxford and Cambridge, just because you enjoy watching interesting maths videos. Unfortunately, most of the good maths YouTube channels do make it very enjoyable and entertaining, as well as including the content. So hopefully it isn't too painful and doesn't feel like work.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. For me, I would just say, again, do take a look at Tom's videos, Tomrocksmaths. I think that's really useful just to see if do you actually enjoy the applications of math? What do you want to talk about in your personal statement, or just things like that? It might give you a few ideas. And also, I would say you might want to take a look at the Oxford Mathematics YouTube channel. They do quite a few useful videos on there too. So yeah, but I think that's it from us today. But thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be posting useful links and resources in the description, so make sure to have a look. We'll also be doing more Q&As in the next few weeks, so do take a look. And we've done quite a few already as well. You can follow us on social media. We will just post a link to our website again, which is InsideUni. Make sure to follow Tomrocksmaths. Take a look at the social media from Oxford and Cambridge Math Societies too. And yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you to Aaron, Parth, and Tom for being on this call today. It's been great to have you, and have a nice day. Bye.